BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, I'm Matthew Bannister. Thank you for downloading this episode of Last Word from BBC Radio 4. For more information about the programme, please visit bbc.co.uk/Radio 4. On Last Word this week, the heiress and fashion designer Gloria Vanderbilt, the former Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi, and Philomena Lynott, mother of the Thin Lizzy lead singer Phil Lynott. But first, Franco Zeffirelli was the Italian director who created beautiful spectacles on stage and on screen. Whether he was masterminding opera at La Scala and Covent Garden, plays at the Old Vic and the National Theatre, or making films of Shakespeare's greatest works, the look of the production was always important. The Radio 4 presenter, the Reverend Richard Coles, worked on one of Franco Zeffirelli's films in the 1990s.
He was large. He looked German, actually, but he was very giving of himself, sometimes in ways which perhaps a little too generous, if I can put it that way. But he was curious. He sort of was interested in people, maybe not for long, but in the duration of his interest, he would be very kind of abundant with anecdote and memory, and he was curious about you.
Franco Zeffirelli was born in Florence. His mother was a dressmaker and his father a married drapery merchant. When Franco was 6, his mother died and he was brought up by his father's cousin. But another influential figure was a British teacher called Mary O'Neill, who gave him private lessons.
She was one of the many hundreds and thousands of British citizens that, for one reason or the other, they came and lived in Florence. Through her, I learned about Shakespeare for the first time and the great theatre and so on, notions of what the great actors have been or were, but something much more important, the rules of ethics, what is right and what is wrong.
Franco had begun his studies as an architect, but after the war decided to switch to theatre. He found work as an actor with the director Luchino Visconti, who later employed him as a designer and assistant director. Zeffirelli began to get his own productions, first of opera, then stage plays. In 1960, he directed a critically acclaimed production of Romeo and Juliet at the Old Vic, as the Daily Telegraph critic Rupert Christensen explains.
What people found most astonishing about it was the way that he managed to create this atmosphere of Italian Renaissance town in a way that was completely new, I think, to British theatre at the time. It was all a bit grey and realist and looked back and angerish, and suddenly there was this burst of colour and sunlight and youth and dust and heat on stage.
And this was Judi Dench, wasn't it? The young Judi Dench.
Judi Dench was Juliet, and Peggy Mount was the nurse.
Come, thou day and night, for thou wilt lie upon the wings of night, whiter than new snow on a raven's back. Come, gentle night.
I invited them to be the characters that Shakespeare wanted. The essence of his purpose was to communicate passions, joys, hatred, situations and characters to the audience. I grabbed that essential entity in Shakespeare and served it.
All he really cared about was the look of things, and in that respect he was absolutely meticulous. But he wasn't one of those directors who did a lot of method, digging into your souls. He just liked things to look lovely, and look lovely they did.
And opulent too?
Very, very opulent. I mean, the problem was, especially in opera, that the sets were so huge that they required very long intervals to change. And there was a sort of rebellion at Covent Garden in the early 1960s when somebody worked out that the intervals in his production of Rigoletto lasted longer than the opera.
There was a celebrated Tosca, though, wasn't there, in the 60s?
Tosca was amazing. Tosca lasted over 40 years, and I don't think it will ever be bettered.
Why?
His style was very simple, very realistic. He almost always set things in the period which the composer specified. He used wonderful designers if he wasn't designing things himself. And, of course, in that case, he had the dream cast of Maria Callas and Tito Gobbi. He managed to bring the best out of them, I think, almost by leaving them alone to get on with it.
We should talk about his film work, and again, Romeo and Juliet stands out, doesn't it?
Romeo and Juliet stands out for me. I think it's rather been overshadowed nowadays by the success of the Baz Luhrmann version. But it moves me still, because they're so young, those two. They're not very good actors, Leonard Whiting and Olivia Hussey, but they're so beautiful.
Oh, that I were a glove upon that hand, that I might touch that cheek.
Oh, me.
She speaks.
What sort of a character was Franco Zeffirelli?
I don't think he was a very nice man. I mean, he had a monstrous ego.
He had a team around him of people who were responsible for running his rather chaotic and disorderly life. And he knew everybody. And I remember there was a sideboard groaning with framed photographs of the great and the good. I mean, literally everybody from Pope Paul VI to Barbara Bush, who had sent him a photograph of their dog, which was autographed with a sort of felt-tip paw mark.
Larry came all the time with John and the family.
The Oliviers, yes.
And Carlos Kleiber and Karajan and Domingo and Lenny Bernstein. And Lenny was the king there. He entertained us every night, playing, improvising and inventing things.
He was a very controlling sort of person. So if you lived in the house, you gradually became more and more a sort of planet in orbit around him. I remember the first day there, I did this piece of work for him and I gave it to him. And he looked at it and he went, Richard, you are a magnificent genius. You are a genius. Of course, you can't help but feel flattered. Franco Zeffirelli said that. And then he said, I have a job. Only you can do this. Only you can help me. After dinner, you come to my room. So after dinner, the butler conveyed me into Franco's inner sanctum, which was this study. And there he sat me down and handed me, magnificent genius, a pad and a pen, and then dictated letters to me for 2 hours. One of them to Mariel Hemingway. So there was always anecdotal value, even in the humiliation.
Myself am moved to woo thee for my wife.
Moved? In good time.
He worked famously with Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor. He must have dealt with some of the great egos, Maria Callas and others. How did his ego, coming up to their egos, work?
He just left them alone to get on with it. He knew that if he gave them a wonderful frame and got them into a good mood, on the night they would deliver. And on the whole, I think that's how it worked.
I knew you were the first. You were immovable.
Why? What's immovable?
A stool. Right there.
I think the films steadily get worse, really. I mean, the last one about Maria Callas is excruciating, toe-curlingly bad. And I can't say much either for The Champ or Endless Love, but the opera films are quite good, I have to say.
And a production of Aida, I think you saw, which stood out.
There was a production of Aida at La Scala in 2006, which was so spectacular, so expensive, so opulent, so many people on stage that you just had to sort of lie back and enjoy it, really. I mean, it was ludicrous, but fabulous too at the same time.
Rupert Christensen on Franco Zeffirelli, who's died aged 96.